All right, so my name's Jessica Empringham, and I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about phone use while we're driving. So, drinking and driving. We've all seen the MAG commercials. We know it's bad. You have 1 drink, 2 drinks, 3 drinks. All of a sudden, your driving ability decreases while your reaction time increases. We know it's bad. It's taboo in our society now. We look to somebody that's done that and think to ourselves, you know what? That person was irresponsible that night, and I would never do that. But I bet some of you use your phones when you drive. And I bet some of you even text and drive. And these types of actions can have the same consequences that drinking and driving can have. But this new type of distraction that our generation really doesn't take seriously enough. So we all know that when we're driving and we put our phone to our ear, or we're taking out our phone and texting, that we can get a pretty hefty fine for this. But what about Bluetooth, hands-free conversation? Do we think this has the same type of deficit to our driving ability that the other two do? And the answer is yes. And the reason for this is because of the way that we pay attention to things. So our attention has 2 main components. We have our visual spatial component, which is our attention to the images and our space around us. And we have our auditory verbal component, which is our attention to the noises in our conversations. So interference of attention happens when we're trying to pay attention to one thing, and that decreases our ability to pay attention to another thing. So I think the most prominent one that we know about in our society is within modal interference. So that would be like when you're texting your friend and your other friend's trying to tell you a story. It's really hard to pay attention to both because they both deal with your auditory verbal attention. But there's also something called between modal interference. And this happens because both components of attention are pulling from that same pool of cognitive resources. So when you're paying attention to one component, you're taking away the cognitive resources from that other component. So when we're driving, we ideally want all of our cognitive resources and attention on the road. There's already so many things to think about. We have the pedestrians, we have the lights, we have the signs. There's so many things. When we're adding that conversation in there, we are spreading our cognitive resources too thin. We don't have the multitasking ability to do this. We are throwing it away from the road into this conversation that may not be necessary. And I want you guys to realize here that there's no mention of actually putting your phone to your ear. So it's actually the conversation that we're having and not that phone use. So texting and driving is even worse. And this is because, as well as that between modal interference, we also have within modal interference. So within our visual spatial, as we're paying attention to everything going on the road, we also have to read our phone. And then in our auditory verbal, we have to think about what that person's saying, think about what we want to say, and then again, just type out what we're going to say to them. So, and this is still pulling from that same limited pool of cognitive resources. So you are pretty much throwing away the cognitive resources that you should be giving to the road into this text that really probably isn't that important and that could have waited. So a lot of you may be thinking, you know what, this is just a psych study. I can do this, I can multitask, I'm way better than everyone else. But it's not true. There's been so much research done on this. Even with hands-free phone use, you have decreased lane keeping ability, which means that you are really just not as good at going in a straight line. And you also don't look at things as much. You have decreased eye movement. You're just not looking around, which is obviously really important. And what they've actually found, which is interesting, is that you can still focus on the really hazardous things just as well, like maybe a big truck in the middle of the road or flashing lights. But the other things you're not focusing on as much. And how many accidents have you guys been in where it's this slight anomaly that just catches you off guard? So maybe that person, you thought they were just taking a wide turn, but they were actually turning into your lane. Those are the types of things you'll be missing when you're having a hands-free conversation. So what can we do to avoid these risks? Honestly, it's not feasible for me to ask you guys to never use your phone when you drive. Emergencies happen, but I can ask you guys to never text and drive. It takes on average about 5 seconds to read a text. And if you're driving 90 kilometers an hour down the road, you're looking at your phone for the length of a football field. Do you know how many things could happen in that time? That's a football field, that's crazy. So don't text and drive. You can also, if you really need that conversation, bring a friend in your car. It's been shown that when you have a passenger in your seat, that conversation really doesn't decrease your driving ability as much. And this is because your friend actually knows what's happening. So if the driving becomes really hard, then your friend will stop talking to you or talk to you less. They can even help you out by helping you navigate and by pointing things out. And the last thing, honestly, just limit your phone use while we're driving. Try and put your phone on silent. right? You can, if you really, really need directions and you're lost and you're just freaking out, pull over. It's not worth it. These types of actions can really have extreme consequences, and we should all be doing our best to avoid these. In 2011, 23% of mobile accidents involved the use of a mobile phone. Automobile accidents involve the use of a mobile phone. And I bet you most of these people thought to themselves, you know what, I'm above this. But don't be one of those people. Put your phone away when you drive. Thanks.